In this video, I want to share with you a snippet of a conversation I recorded with a sales leader. And I asked him a question. What do, from his experience, do top sales reps do that are different from average and below average sales reps? And the answer he gives me will shock you.
This question gets asked, right? Like we talked about, like how do the best do it? Like, what are the best reps? So one is methodology, science, painting a picture like you described. But there's one thing though, which is very consistent that I've seen in all the reps I've managed. They live in the details. They live in the details.
Tell me more.
So to unpack that, so you've got the traditional, hey, I'm a rep. Here's my VP. We're going to have a conversation. Traditional things, close date, who's the stakeholder, what's the impending event. So you go through all this stuff. And the more you can talk about it, the more versed you are with the configuration of the deal. Naturally, there's a larger, upside of that closing. But here's a question that I like to ask. And this, for me, differentiates the best from the rest. And it's this: how do we lose this deal? Tell me, as a rep, right? I'm asking you a question. How are we going to lose this deal? So you're telling me all what we need to do to win this deal. I get that. I totally understand. But tell me, so the best reps, they know exactly if these things don't happen, we're not going to get the deal. It could be, well, I'm connected with the VP, but the budget actually comes from the CTO or the CIO or the CMO or the CRO, and I do not have line of sight. Okay, that's how we lose this deal.
Hey, I have a quick message before we go back to the video. If you work in tech sales as a BDR, SDR, AE, and you're struggling to book quality meetings every week, well, I have a free guide that helps you book at least one extra qualified meeting via LinkedIn every single week. It's 3 simple strategies, just 30 minutes a day. If you follow it, you're booking one extra meeting, at least that or more, every single week. If that helps you, if it interests you at all, below this video, click the link and instant access to it right away. Now, go back to the content and enjoy the rest of the video.
It could be, we're running out of time. The money has to be used by December 31st, and we're so far away. I don't have the contract. So these are all little things. And then what you do is what that shows me, first of all, lives in the details, right? They've not only mapped out how you win the deal, they've also figured out like how this deal does not get won. And then they table those things, and then you work with them to figure out how to, get to that objection and moving on. So it could be, like I said, it could be a C-level. Okay, great. You want to set up a meeting between me and, your sponsor's boss and have them come together. So there's a way to mitigate that. But to me, folks that live in the details are almost always the best reps.
That's an amazing question. And when you ask that question, I'm thinking about, are these reps thinking about red flags? Are they aware of red flags? Or like, what is that what it is? Like, because I've always heard, like, I had a rep with a sales manager when I was a rep. He goes, okay, there's always a red flag in a deal, so look for it. So is that the kind of same thing you're talking about? There's always something that you can't look for it because it's there. Don't be happy ears and think, oh, this is a slam dunk. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, it's human nature, right? You don't want to get, okay, there's human nature. You don't want to hear no, right? You want to, get the yeses. And it's hard to hear no, so you avoid them, which is pretty standard, right? However, in this example that I quoted you, that we might need to get to the CIO or the CTO, we might never get to the CIO and CTO. Maybe that's never going to happen. And you might still win the deal because your sponsor, the SVP, is telling you, it's all good. I got it covered. I know them. I meet with them. What I'm saying is that is the mentality, right? It's like the rigor that you put into a deal. Because if you're doing that, you have mapped out all other possible paths to success. And to me, that is a high confidence deal, because at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of objections that you have to get over, right? To any deal. So humans like to buy from humans, right? So that's super important. Back in the day, I joke about this. predates my time, but they would used to send two sales reps to each meeting. You know why? Because if they didn't like one, they might like the other. So
That's
the
funny.
probability of the
That's funny.
probability, you multiply the factor of, getting, because people have to like you if they have to buy something from you, right? So
Yeah.
it's still to me, it's still an emotional connection is super important. And that's another, we'll probably get into it about this whole compensation and sales and all that. But no, so they have to like you. Once they like you, then it's a matter of figuring out like what the objections are. You want to draw out the objections as early as possible. And one of the things that I did was I implemented this sales sort of like structure, sales process called sense making. And that's a whole other, you and I can spend another half hour just talking about that. But one of the things, parameters of that process is to draw out objections as quickly as possible in the sales process. So in the first and second meeting, you want to get to as many stakeholders and many objections, because what you want to do is you want to see the objection, get to it, either handle it or realize that it's not worth our while, right? Just let's not waste any energy there.
Mm.
But that is all, back to the same thing about, yeah, there's always red flags. Nothing's going to be perfect. There are going to be things that are out of your control, but you need to be thinking about those things, because if you're not thinking that deeply and broadly, you're going to be missing other stuff. So that's the elite sales teams and elite performers, differentiates them from the rest. And they also win. They hit their quotas,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you got those real magicians, right?
That's amazing. I am curious. You mentioned that like you have this methodology, and you have to go deep if you want, but are you handing these your reps, your teams, a bunch of you must ask these questions during discovery to uncover these objections, or is it just walk me through that, or is it just you mention you make sure they do? I don't know. Walk me through that if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I said, you have a great sales rep, right? They build a lot of success, but it's not tangible, right? You can't codify it. Like you don't know, like, it's the way they talk, is the way they listen, right? Is the way they, assess information, is the way they, connect dots. So there are all these things in there. So, like I said, fortunately, I was very successful, and I was like, how do I get this all out, right? How do I all get this, put it on a table and really start mapping it out? So what I did was, in collaboration with great people on my ops team, is we defined a sales process, and I tried to boil it down, or we tried to boil it down to some key fundamental things and why deals get lost, right?
Mm.
And to me, it is a lot of the times it's avoidable. A lot of the times it's avoidable. I think you have a larger probability of closing winning business if it's the right ICP, if it's the right, type of deal, than losing it. But what ends up happening is that the process that you follow is usually where you lose it, right? There's gaps in the process, or it's not as smooth, or it's not, it becomes, a lot of things that I've seen is that a sales process becomes about your, like the vendor's sales process, right? It's never about you
We
or
need
the
this.
company.
We need this. We need this. We need this. Like,
Ex-
okay, how you help me, man? Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah, yeah,
exactly, to
yeah,
the T, exactly, right? And that to me was backwards, right?
yeah.
I mean, like we're trying to pursue this person to buy something from us, yet we're saying me, 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 me. So we had to reverse that, right? So we built this sales process, and it had, some fundamental tenets. Number one was the first, couple of meetings, super critical, right? And you are putting in energy, you need to get something back for that. Like as a rep, you're putting energy, right? It's everybody knows you're a salesperson. There's nothing to hide here, right? You have a goal, you're hired, you got a job, and the person on the other side of the table has a job, right? So for us, it was paramount to get to the list of stakeholders, right from the executive buyer all the way down, in the first, latest second meeting. Otherwise, we don't proceed.
You want the list, or you want to FaceTime with them? Like they must be on the call.
No, well, ideally,
Yeah,
yes, that would be perfect,
yeah, yeah.
right? But if we can't get to this CIO, for example, then we do need to know their name. We need to have their information. right? So
Gotcha.
that's super important, right? Get the stakeholders, the buying center has to be mapped. Now, what ends up happening, a lot of folks wait till, eighth, ninth, 10th meeting to do this. No, you got to do it in the first two meetings, number one. Number two, here's another really wild one we introduced. We were like, and this was very effective, actually. You got to tell me the procurement contact. So if you're going through the business, if you're going through IT, I need to know the procurement contact, and you have to map out to me your procurement process. Like this is the second meeting, right? Now, usually what ended up happening is that the buyer didn't even know that there's a procurement person or a contact or process
No,
unless it's a
no
formal
way.
RFP and RFI, right? It happens, right?
Yeah.
People just
Yeah.
reach
Yeah.
out, they do research, they reach out to you.
Gotcha.
So they're like doing all this stuff, and then what ends up happening is you're like eighth meeting in, and you've done all the demos, and you've gotten pricing, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna go into my system, my whatever procurement system, and I'm gonna put it in there, and they're gonna get a procurement person assigned, and what they find out is, well, procurement had 10 projects that are already assigned, and in this fiscal year, they have no bandwidth. So sure, we'll do it, but we'll pick it up in 3 months from now, and time kills deals, right?
Right. Right.
So no, we need it up front. And if that's a problem, then you need to go as our prospect and go figure out this procurement piece, make sure they have the bandwidth to be able to do that. So that's another thing, in that process is to kind of draw all these objections out. One more I'll leave you with, which I think was very important, is which we learned is, human psychology.
Mm.
People generally don't like to lie. People generally like to fulfill their commitments, right? Um, However, in order to, have people abide by that, you have to build a construct, right? So for us, we had this joint engagement plan. So you have a sales process, it translated into a joint engagement plan, which is, common. But the one unique thing we did was we would open up the joint engagement plan in that first or second meeting and say, I'm going to share it with you, or you tell me, Mr. or Miss Prospect, what is your go live date for this project? But you have to tell me, or you need to type it in yourself. So this is not a general question, right? It's like specifically tell me. So is it a quarter out? Is it December 31st? It is February 20, whatever. Is it, April, whatever? Put in the date, because once they put that date in there, and we've learned people are like, they are fixated on the fact that they put a date, and they will move mountains to make sure. Because then once you have the date, then what we did, we worked our way backwards. Okay, great. So that's the date. Awesome. Our project takes, 1 month implementation. Great. Now we're at this date. How long does your contracting take? Oh, it takes 3 weeks. Great. Now put this date. So now we're moving backwards. You're like, well, this doesn't add up, because you want to go live this date, but your process says it's going to take this long. And now we start building this really collaborative joint engagement plan. So it's not about the product. Think about this. It's not about the pricing. I mean, those things are important. It just becomes about the buying process, and then everything else sort of like comes, into that. So we deployed effectively, and that's how we were able to take like reps that were not doing the best practice, or maybe
Mm.
didn't have that natural disposition to do these things naturally, but we codified it and put it in front of them, and we saw like our win rate go up by like 20%, 20 to 25% through on enterprise sales, uh, adopting this type of methodology.
Amazing. That is totally amazing. And that's so much value. I got some value, but I'm sure by listening, they would like taking notes as they're listening to this.